Have you guys heard of the horror stories about people getting fish in their tanks and it completely crashing? Well, make sure you stay tuned for our quarantine tips on how to successfully introduce new fish into your tanks. So, a lot of times you hear us say, make sure that your tank is set up and cycling before you add fish. But what does cycling your tank means? Well, cycling your tank is where obviously you have your fish tank, but you need to have your sand bed in there. You need to have your rocks. If it's a freshwater tank or saltwater and you want to have the fake plants, make sure you get those in. And you obviously have your filter. So you want to have the water and the whole system up and running without fish or anything in it. By doing this, you establish the biological filter in the system. And this will help to make sure that when you actually do add fish or corals, other living things, that they don't die or have a mass tank crash. So what do we mean when we talk about biological filters? Well, a good example, and this is how I kind of like to think about it, is have you heard of probiotics or the good bacteria in your gut? Sometimes you get it by eating certain yogurt brands and it's beneficial. Well, aquariums have the same sort of beneficial bacteria that live within them. And when you first start a fish tank, it's not going to have that. So you kind of got to jumpstart it. There are a couple products out on the market that you can add to your system when you first set it up that help to jumpstart it. But naturally, over time, they're going to start developing and growing in your tank. So hopefully that helps. A big part of getting new fish is quarantining. A lot of times when you get fish from local pet stores, they're all going to be in one large system together. And with that comes the chance and the risk that there are illnesses that are floating around the water. You might not see them, but there's a really, really good chance that they're there. So when you bring your fish home, we kind of recommend that you have a spare tank set aside that you can use for quarantine. Now, it depends on who you talk to as far as how long you want to quarantine your fish, but a good rule of thumb is 2 weeks to 30 days of quarantine. After 30 days, for sure, your fish should not be showing any signs of illness, should be eating healthy, and would hopefully be ready to put into your main tank. How should you set up your quarantine tank? Well, your quarantine tank, unless you have a really large fish, doesn't need to be that big. A lot of times 10 or 20 gallon tanks are going to work just fine for you, but a couple things that you should keep in mind when you're doing it. And it depends on your personality, but I like to have a blank bottom tank. I don't usually keep sand in there, but you do need to have something for the fish to hide in so that it feels safe. A lot of times you can use a PVC tube. That gives them something to hide in or behind around. That's a good rule of thumb. It needs to have its own filtration system. You don't want to have this if you've got multiple tanks attached to one of your other systems. It needs to be a completely separate system. And at the end of the quarantine period, completely dump all the water out of that tank before you quarantine anybody else. So in review, quarantining a new fish is always important. You should go for at least 30 days to make sure that your fish is healthy, and at the end of quarantine, completely empty and reset your tank. This video has been brought to you by New Life Spectrum. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button and splash the subscribe. See you next time!